There's plenty of things to be angry about and things that you want to change. Why not use your art as a medium for that?
Black people have been making all kinds of art for forever, for utility, for creative expression, and for activism. Despite what mainstream white institutions, inaccurate art historical narratives, and constructed notions of high and low art would have us believe, Black people create art, love art, are art.
We resist the notion that art is not ours. We resist the idea that we must forget, ignore, or erase our art. We resist anyone who tells us how we should resist. We resist through art.
You're listening to AFROPUNK Solution Sessions, where we have the conversations that matter to us, conversations that lead to solutions.
I'm Bridget Todd.
And I'm Eve Jeffcoat.
People can think that art is bullshit, and sometimes people can think that creativity is bullshit. But being in an organization where I see like the critical impact of what they're doing, and I also know that like I have to work my ass off to see this mission to its fullest. And so it's that where it's just like you fight differently because you know what you want to accomplish. Like the goals are really clear and they don't feel like there's an urgency, you know?
That's writer, curator, and advocate Kimberly Drew, who can be found on social media at Museum Mammy, discussing anything from sneakers to pay transparency. She created a blog called Black Contemporary Art, was the social media manager for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and is co-editor, along with Jenna Wortham, of the forthcoming book Black Futures. She believes in and affirms the power of Black art and its role in protest and change.
It is profoundly sad to me that someone like me or someone like us, creative, powerful, thoughtful, caring Black people, it's just not a guarantee that we'll get the same opportunities. Right. And that's not something we can take for granted. And it's something that I personally am really passionate about changing, and I know I'm not alone in that passion. But yeah, it's something I think about all the time where I'm just like, I can't imagine doing something else. Also, I was afforded so few models for what I do. You know? And so for me, it's kind of like a really sad joke.
So you recently did a campaign where the focus, the Reebok project, where the focus was about you being a woman in a male-dominated space. Is that kind of how you think of your work? Do you think, oh, I'm a woman working in this space that is so dominated by male, whether that's the artwork or the people who are working behind the scenes? Or are you just like, oh, I'm doing my work and this is what I have to do?
Somewhere in between. The arts is really heavily populated by women. The thing, though, that's worth mentioning is that very few women are in power. So I've always worked in majority femme workspaces. I have not always had the privilege of working where the top-down leadership was majority femme. Never. Except for like the tiny institutions that I worked at. And so that for me is a critical issue in the arts. But in general, big picture, the work that I'm doing, I think about the fact that we just live in a heteropatriarchal society and it's fucking annoying, and you feel the limitations and pressures of it all the time. Like the higher that I soar, the more that I feel that glass ceiling pressing down on my ass.
That's real. In the art museums with the largest budgets in the country, $15 million and up, there's a gender gap for museum directors. And that's the case for Black folks high up in art institutions, too. There's been controversy over white people being chosen to curate African art collections. And the Guggenheim Museum in New York just hired its first full-time Black curator, Ashley James. But it's so important to have Black folks and femme folks in those positions in art institutions, which so often perpetuate the ideas that marginalized people don't matter, don't belong, and are not worthy of celebration. The words of Toni Cade Bambara on the role of artists and cultural workers accountable to oppressed people resonates with Kimberly.
Like, very inspired by Toni Cade Bambara, like, make the revolution irresistible. But at the same time, it's hard work. It is such hard work.
Do you think there's anything specific about the socio-political climate we're in right now that affects the way Black people think about what it means to view art, what it means to walk into a museum, what it means to walk into a gallery, what it means to study art?
I don't think we're like in a particularly unique time. I think we would do ourselves a disservice to say that. But I think that now there is more access to information that can have the return on us showing up into different spaces that maybe we didn't think we could go before. or spaces that we didn't think we needed, or spaces that have been more invested in showing us the things that reflect the times than ever. But I don't know. It's a weird one because like I think about Dr. Kelly Jones curated an exhibition about art in the civil rights movement, and there's so many works in that exhibition that were like presented and sold, and like the money from the sales would go to support SNCC or SCLC. And like learning that bit of information, I'm like, yo, we're not doing anything new. The struggles that we're having right now are very much mirrored throughout time, and of course they're unique and changing and blah 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 blah. But there's always been such an extreme tie between art and activism that I don't think right now we're reinventing the wheel. I just think the people who are driving the wheel look a little different, which is tight.
After the break, we sit down with an artist who is at the wheel.
I was always the kid in like my art classes, whether it was in high school or in college, that was trying to make something that was talking about race or justice or something. Even if I wasn't doing it in these very eloquent ways, my artwork was always about something, always about Blackness in some way. And that was definitely because of the household that I was raised in. It was because of my mom. I always felt like I needed to be saying something in my work. And I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that you have to be saying something when you create artwork, but I think that visual art is a great opportunity to do so. If there's something to say, something to talk about, and there always is. There's plenty of things to be angry about and the things that you want to change. And so why not use your art as a medium for that? My name is Tatyana Fazlalizadeh.
She's an oil painter, art consultant for the Netflix show She's Gotta Have It, and she creates street art, including Stop Telling Women to Smile, a project that addresses gender-based street harassment. Her art is centered around race, gender, and how people experience public space.
I think the idea that you can use your work to be of use to people, to be of use to an issue, to be of use to a movement, is something that I probably won't lose. I hope that continues to stay with my work. There's a piece I did recently that was a portrait of a Black man with flowers around him that said, "Let Black men be soft." And this piece got a lot of hate.
That word soft in the Black community.
Yes,
we know how like weighty that is.
Absolutely. And I knew that. Like, I know what the word soft means to cis hetero Black men. Like, I know. I get it. And that's why I use the word soft.
Exactly.
And I put it out into the street, and there was a lot to this thing. I knew that it was weighty. And maybe I thought to myself, this is a topic I should not be talking about. Maybe this is something that I'm not ready to touch on in my work. Maybe I'm not the artist to do it. The piece got defaced. There was a lot of talk about it. People like, even when I put it up, like Black men in the street were there as I was putting it up, like, nah, sis, this ain't it, and telling me just how, like, this is not it, And so that's a topic in my work. It's just like this idea of tackling and challenging masculinity. But I'm doing it already with Stop Telling Them to Smile. That is a challenge to men, to challenge what they've been taught about masculinity, how they approach women, how they interact with women. But to directly talk to them about their masculinity, about how they can be soft, how they can be tender, how they can be human. And not just them, but how other people treat Black men, how we should allow them to be soft and be tender and be human. It was a lot happening in that piece.
One of the things I really love about your work is your use of text. And your America is Black series and the Oklahoma is Black. And you really put an emphasis on like affirming Black people's existence and this idea of erasure and kind of saying, no, we're not erased, we're not silenced, and when it does, it's systemic. We know we're here, and that, Oklahoma is Black. So can you talk more about the reason that you use that messaging, or that you continue to put the emphasis on that idea in your work?
Yeah, America is Black started out as one piece, as one mural. And I did it, in November 2016 after the presidential election. And it really was a way to kind of like clap back at this election that had just happened, to say, no, like Black people are here, queer people are here, all of these different people are here. And not only are we here, but we've been here, America isn't just this sort of whitewashed, whatever white narrative we have of what an American is. America is actually this type of person. And to be very specific about that, and to be very intentional about that, and be very unapologetic about that by saying America is Black. And so then to break it down even more so, to say Oklahoma is Black, or Seattle is Black, or these other particularly cities who have a lot of white people, who people sort of, I think, want to ignore the Blackness of these places.
Right.
And it's sort of to be like, no, Black people are here, and not just are here, but have been here, made this place. And so when I did the piece Oklahoma is Black, it was very much so about saying, this is Blackness here in this space. This is what it looks like. This is how it was created here. These are the Black people that are here. And not just famous Black people or well-known Black people, but just regular, everyday Black folks. I think it's important to say regular, everyday Black folks are here and exist, and this is what their lives are like, and this is what they experience. And it's not for Black people, because Black people, we know that we're here. We know that we exist, you know. In that sense, it's to celebrate the Blackness. It's to celebrate these Black folks. And for anyone else who is viewing the artwork, it's for them to sort of be confronted with a group of people that they may not want to see, that they want to erase. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with my work in general when I paint people and draw people. It's not just about representation and visibility, although that is very important. It's also about the voice and the words and the experience and the lives of these people that I'm talking about and that I'm showing.
When I asked her about white folks appropriating and not acknowledging Black art, she said that part of the way Black folks can push back against the tyranny of white supremacist art institutions is to remember the inherent value in our work and ourselves.
A friend of mine gave me this example of just like, you know, the sort of amphitheater where everybody is kind of like sitting in this big room staring down at the stage, at this white space, at this white light, and the white light is whiteness. And we're out in the balconies, in the darkness, just staring down at this light, trying to think about how we can get there and how we can get there. And that's how we value our stuff, how we value our lives, how we value our work. It's just getting this acceptance from the white systems, the white institutions, the museums, the galleries, getting them to accept us and hear us. When what we should be doing is looking around in the darkness at each other. Like, that's where the value is. Instead of trying to like get down there to the white light on the stage, look at who's next to you, because this is your community and this is what's important. If I'm making work about Black people and for Black people, then why isn't that enough? Why do I have to look for white institutions and places to value my work and to tell me that it's good? I shouldn't have to do that. I should just be in community with the people around me. So I think if we start to value ourselves more and start to understand the importance of our community and who we're around and just Black folks in general, instead of trying to break into these white systems and institutions, then we'll be able to value ourselves even more so.
But when it comes down to it, she would challenge artists who are finding their voice to be bold.
I think that artwork and being artists and being creatives, we have such a rare opportunity that a lot of people don't have, you know, to sort of be as free as we possibly can. To not go into a project or go into an artwork thinking, are people going to like this? Is this going to make me money? But to think, what is it that I have to say? What am I trying to get out? And to really be as bold as possible as you can with getting that out. And you might make something that's terrible, you know, but you also might make something that's great. And so to start with yourself and to think about how can I be as loud and as expressive as possible? You know, I've always been a quiet kid, a quiet person. And so I sort of use my artwork as a way to speak out for myself. And so if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to use my artwork to speak for myself, I might as well make it as radical as I possibly can. I might as well push the envelope as much as I possibly can. And when I feel myself starting to get comfortable and starting to be insecure and be scared about putting out my voice and putting out radical work, then I know it's time to push myself even more so, you know.
Okay, so what do you think, Bridget? Yes, art and activism are two different things. And yes, art can be moving and motivating and encourage us into action. I think it can be kind of in our nature to look for the thing that has an immediate effect that's rewarding, and that's what productivity feels like. And you know, we're all obsessed with productivity, but in ignoring art's capacity to alter feelings, thoughts, and patterns, we'd be ignoring that powerful, effective force that's, creating things with our minds and bodies. Art that mobilizes people is part of our everyday lives and our everyday experiences. And there are plenty of historical examples of it getting people engaged.
I think you're right. I think your point about how sometimes a sort of productivity mindset can really make us skeptical of change that takes a long time to show up. It's such a cheesy saying, but that saying, the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. I really think that's kind of what you mean, that, if you make some sort of piece of art, whether it's visual art or, film or anything else, it might not be the day that you send it into the world that you feel or see any kind of repercussions from it. But we've sort of been tricked by capitalism, by our social situation, to think that is the only way to feel actual change. And that's not the way it works. I think that you're right that you may not be able to quantify the kind of changes that art can put into the world, into the way that we think, into the way that we understand and absorb things, to the way that we feel in the world. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. I also think we have plenty of examples of creative work that actually does push the needle on social change. I'm thinking about things like Dreamhampton's documentary, Surviving R. Kelly, right? Like, R. Kelly did not really face consequences until she made a film, a piece of creative work. And that was what got the ball rolling. Or Ava DuVernay's Netflix special, When They See Us, based on the actual Central Park 5, but a creative work, a creative interpretation or retelling of what happened. And, prosecutors involved in that case, because of her creative work, putting art into the world and telling that story on screen, those prosecutors faced the first consequences that they ever faced for their wrongdoing in that. I think it's both, that we do have times where you can say, like, this was the actual meaningful, quantifiable change that this work of art or this creative expression caused in the world. And even if you can't do that, that doesn't mean it's not actually still creating change. So I think that you're right.
My name is Charmaine Minniefield. I'm a visual artist and an activist and producer in the city of Atlanta and beyond.
Charmaine has made murals on Ruby Doris Smith Robinson and Dr. Doris Derby, a digital installation that honored the tradition of the ring shout, and paintings of ethereal Black bodies. And her art and her activism converge. We met in her studio on a late spring evening.
Should I shut the windows? Do you hear that sound in the back?
It actually is, it's a nice atmosphere.
Okay.
So, what does the word artist mean to you? And what does the word activist mean to you? And are they separate?
As an artist, I am, rendering the truth as I see it. And that truth could be an expression of my surroundings or my environment or the past or my hope for the present or the future, but also an expression of my own personal identity. So as an artist, that's what I do. As an activist, I address, for my particular form of activism, I address my approach to my personal expression based on my political views or my concern for justice. I personally hold center in that effort the idea of freedom, just as a mantra towards a goal of an equitable and just future. And so I use the term freedom constantly in my work, and I use it almost as an alchemy or ritual. And I do so in my public art presence in communities, as well as my professional creative practice in my studio work and my museum and gallery work.
Part of what Charmaine does in her work is reclaim narratives that have been overshadowed.
We didn't have symbols of freedom in our own identity, in our own, actual person, like physical person represented on the landscape of our day. We didn't have monuments. I call them social iconography. We didn't have our presence. Our story wasn't being seen as far as I could see. And I felt like that imbalance was affecting sort of the ethics of our day, because the intention of, say, Confederate monuments was to message a certain sense of ethics, a certain value system during a certain time in our country's history that I felt like we were still living the residue from. I researched my own alma mater, Agnes Scott College. 2 Confederate monuments were placed there by the Daughters of the Confederacy. Now, we know of the Klan, but what of their wives? Mm-hmm. And those women actually mobilized, organized, and created monuments, Confederate monuments, all the way up to the Capitol in D.C. And of course, right in our own community, right in my own neighborhood, on my campus.
The United Daughters of the Confederacy, if you're not familiar, is an association that was created in the late 19th century and that to this day upholds the Confederate cause. Read Maintaining Slavery was a just one. They're responsible for funding a ton of Confederate monuments around the U.S.
So some of that intention to me needed to be a pushback, a pushback to that intention, but also a reclaiming of our own narratives in that pushback. So I started telling stories of freedom. I started telling stories of Black women. And I started painting monuments to them and hoping to affect change in communities where social symbolism was communicating a certain sense of ethics. Now we were communicating nurturing, community, justice, freedom, humanity. That's what my work started to represent. And it went all the way from me painting my own ancestors within my own identity and practice to doing research in communities inside of personal archives or public archives.
She went to the Penn Center archives at UNC Chapel Hill and to the archives at Spelman, where she'd find stories of all kinds of amazing Black women. And she would use her art to resist Black erasure and disrupt gentrifying communities. Adrienne McNeil Herndon, for instance, was one woman that she honored. As Charmaine puts it, she was
the grand ancestor of the Black arts in Atlanta. She was a theater artist, the wife of Alonzo Herndon, the Atlanta Life Insurance Company founder, and a pillar in education at HBCUs.
And the context of her art, its situation in time and place is important. Through her paintings, drawings, and projections, she says that she's tagging buildings with freedom.
How I approach each project is community. I don't just come in and put up a wall. I engage that community, and we go through a real transformation within that community. And that symbol, again, remains, this monument for this woman, and this amazing, beautification inside of it, too. And the fact that this community is worthy of that investment, yes. And it's not something that doesn't look like them. It's actually an image of one of them. Her son, Ruby Doris Smith Robinson's son, didn't live far from there. He stopped by that wall. I didn't even know. So now he drives by and his mother, he walked up and said, "That's my mom."
My heart.
She died when he was 2. You know what I'm saying? He said, "I didn't know her."
Yeah.
So that whole family, what does that mean? And we've already, there's so many examples of amazing monuments that have so much impact, again, affecting the social aesthetic and ethics of the day. It's real. I've witnessed it. I've interacted with the preachers and the entrepreneurs. I bought all their paintbrushes, even though I know they stole them from Walmart. You know what I'm saying? I gave out mangoes to all of the gang members, and so by the time there was a conflict, they all formed, right? They had my back, and they vowed to protect the wall. And, now there's a community investment. That, to me, is activism. It's on the ground showing people that they're valuable and their stories matter.
And that activism, coupled with art, has always been a part of Black culture.
Do you ever feel like art or the recognition of certain work as art is left out of conversations about movements or movement work, whether that's in the past or present?
Well, I'm also an arts advocate. Can you tell?
Not at all. What are you talking about?
Maybe so. I don't know. Because I'm an art advocate, I always push for the arts and creative class to be present in all settings, in public policy and politics, in faith spaces and education, always having the creative class also present to make those decisions. Yeah, also, I think that if we rely on artists and creative individuals to contribute, I think that we bring a sense of equity and humanity to those discussions. And I feel like there has been an exclusion from that over the years. But in movement work in particular, like we're talking like preaching to the choir, the folks who are pushing the envelope of social justice forward throughout generations, artists have always been present.
Okay, so this is a lot to unpack, Bridget. Let's get out the solutions handbook. Okay, so what's the solution, Bridget?
Honor the inherent value in Black art and recognize its capacity to address important issues and make a difference.
Okay.
Look to the past for precedents on how Black folks married art and activism to guide our resistance today.
All right, got it.
If you want to make radical art but you're afraid, try leaning into that fear. Your work may be critical in this moment.
Anything else?
Remember that we can use art to affect change in so many ways. Let your own identity and history inform how you choose to do it.
Cool, I think I got everything. AFROPUNK Solution Sessions is presented by AFROPUNK. Your hosts, writers, and producers are Bridget Todd and Eve Jeffcoat. Executive producers are Jocelyn Cooper and Quan Latif Phil. Chelsea Stratton is associate producer. Audio engineering and sound design by Audio Mystics. Many thanks to our content team leads, Emil Wilbekin and Steven Stillos. The Underside of Power is performed by Algiers. Subscribe and download new episodes every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AFROPUNK.
My definition of punk is, in a word, transgressive. And it's confident in one's transgression. I think as we examine ourselves, our identities, how those things are understood and constructed within society and become more critical in looking at all those definitions, I think it's important to transgress against things that are, even if traditional, things that hold us back or limit us. I think punk and the idea of being Black in a society are very, very much aligned. I think as a Black person inhabiting a Black body in a place that wants to extract wealth from you or oppress you or diminish you, your very existence, a smile on your face is transgressive. So yeah, punk is transgression.